Poland will no longer send weapons to Ukraine, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has said, in an escalation of tensions between Warsaw and Kyiv that threatens the West's unity in supporting the country as it battles Russia's invasion. The threat is the latest salvo in a trade dispute that revolves around Poland's refusal to accept imports of Ukrainian grain, in contravention of EU rules. As Morawiecki's ruling party steps up nationalist rhetoric ahead of next month's elections. Asked whether Warsaw would still support Ukraine militarily, Morawiecki replied on Wednesday evening on the Polsat television channel, "We are no longer transferring any weapons, because we will now arm ourselves with the most modern weapons." On Thursday, some senior government officials in Warsaw sought to downplay the prime minister's words, insisting Poland remained committed to helping Ukraine and that no decision had been made about long-term weapons deliveries. At the moment it is as the prime minister said. In the future we will see, Jacek Sasin, Minister for State Assets, told Polish Radio Plus. Ukraine's Agriculture Minister Mykola Solski later said he and his Polish counterpart, Robert Tellis, had in a phone call agreed to find a solution to the grain standoff. Poland's threat came after Warsaw, alongside Hungary and Slovakia, last weekend unilaterally extended an import ban on Ukrainian grain, even after Kyiv promised to ensure its exports would not harm EU farmers. That provoked a backlash from Ukrainian officials, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky. Boguslaw Pasek, a retired Polish major general and professor of international relations at Krakow's Jagiellonian University, said the prime minister's comments over halting weapons transfers to Ukraine were made before an election and not exactly serious in terms of the future militarily because of course Poland needs to support Ukraine. But I think Poland and Ukraine are both making big mistakes right now by playing a political game and discussing an economic rivalry that is bad for both sides. If put into practice, Morawiecki's threat would represent a remarkable U-turn from a government that had previously been a linchpin of the EU and NATO's united front in support of Ukraine. As one of Europe's closest allies of both Washington and Kyiv, Warsaw has consistently urged the West to provide more weapons and financial support to Ukraine and to increase sanctions and political pressure on Russia. The threat to block future arms shipments could also derail efforts by the EU to agree a €20 billion Ukraine weapons fund for the next 4 years, which requires unanimity among the bloc's 27 members and is being opposed by Hungary. Western officials sought to play down the remarks as an emotional response to the tensions over the grain dispute and the domestic Polish political context, which would not herald the end of Warsaw's support for Kyiv's war effort. I just don't see any evidence of that throughout the bureaucracy in Poland. There is a firm commitment to stay the course, said a senior U.S. official in response to Morawiecki's remarks. I don't think we will see a dramatic shift in alliance unity. One EU official said, "It changes nothing at this stage. As always with Poland, there is usually a huge gap between their public statements and real actions. The real problem might come if they decide to block the EU weapons fund, which they haven't so far, and I doubt they would." The tensions between Warsaw and Kyiv have escalated since April when Poland led a coalition of EU states from Central and Eastern Europe that unilaterally banned imports of Ukrainian grain. But there have since been other sources of friction, and Warsaw and Kyiv summoned each other's ambassadors over the summer, including over a Polish complaint that Kyiv had not apologized for Ukrainian atrocities committed during the Second World War. "We provided so much equipment at the beginning of the war, when we wanted to be the second biggest helper after the U.S., that we're now in any case limited in terms of providing much more," said former Polish General Jaroslaw Strozek, who is assistant professor of international relations at the University of Wrocław. "We're in the middle of an election campaign and all these comments are unfortunate, also because Poland transfers so much military equipment to Ukraine from other nations. It shows we did not solve some strategic questions and tensions with Ukraine at the start of the war, about other historical, political, and economic differences." Poland is preparing for a fiercely contested October 15th election, in which Morawiecki's ruling Law and Justice, Peace, party needs the backing of its rural electorate to win a third term in office. Slovakia on Thursday announced that it had agreed to lift its grain blockade in return for Ukraine removing Bratislava from a trade complaint filed this week with the World Trade Organization. The country is holding an election on September 30th in which the frontrunner, Robert Fico, wants to stop aid to Ukraine.